Hello and welcome to episode 56 of the Boot Nerds podcast. JayMike, what's up?
I'm very good, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm kind of pulled my groin on the weekend playing some hockey. One hockey reference of the podcast. Got to get that in there. But I'm feeling actually a lot better today.
That's not going to be the only one. Guaranteed, this is only the beginning of the hockey references. But again, I guess it's a little bit positive because, that means you won't be playing hockey anytime soon. So while I'm sorry for, you pulling your groin, that's never nice. Maybe we'll actually have some football references in the Football Boots podcast. I don't know. Would be nice possible. For a change. Anyways, today we have a bit of it's not going to be an hour-long rant, but it might be something that, we talk about something that we're not best pleased about. In other words, we will discuss the worst football boots in history. So I guess it's going to be a bit of a fun one. Obviously, I guess you guys will already know some of the boots that are going to be on show today, but What is the criteria here, Josh?
I think that what needs to be separated between there needs to be a separation between the worst, like stuff that's legitimately not good, whether it's because it doesn't perform well, it doesn't feel good, it's uncomfortable, there were clearly flaws in the design, and then stuff that was just kind of weird. Because I think you could make the argument that like a T90 Laser 2 is a weird football boot that's not very good by today's standards in a lot of ways, but I don't think that's like a worst boot of all time type product.
Right. Okay, so we're talking about boots that are objectively just rubbish.
Yes, I think that everything, you can't just say something's bad without a reason why you think it's bad.
That's true. Okay. So should we do it brand by brand, or should we just go with whatever pops into our heads and what we feel is the crappiest boot ever? Brand?
I think brand by brand's the best. I haven't put down a list. I think off the cuff is the best because I think the only way to get the true worst football boots ever made are the ones that pop in your head, and they're popping in your head for a reason. But before we go on to our list, I'm very curious what your picks are down below in the comments, whether you have one specific boot that you just absolutely hate, or if you have a list of 10. I'm actually really curious to hear what the people's worst boot of all time is. And again, you can go back as far as you want. We're not talking about current models. We're talking about anything and everything, the history of football boots.
Absolutely. Also, if you think that this is a great topic to discuss, or you just like the Boot Nerds podcast in general, make sure to leave a like on this video so we can see that we're on the right track, or if we need to change something very drastically if everyone is hating on the video. I hope not. Spread some love. And also, if you want to listen to the podcast as an audio-only version while you drive your car or do the dishes or whatever you decide to do when you're not playing football, you can go to bootnerds.com and find links to Spotify or of Apple Podcasts or whatever all the podcast services are called. So go and do that, or otherwise stick with us and watch our lovely faces. But Josh, without further ado, let's get into the list, and let us start with Sir Germans at Adidas.
Okay. I think there are a lot to choose from with Adi because they've taken a lot of risks over the years. I think it's safe to say, right?
I'm very excited to hear your first pick.
Okay, look, my first pick I think is maybe a little bit of a weird one, but I'm picking this based on the fact that it's actually amazing that as a kid, I thought this was a really cool product. And I think that's the case with a lot of these boots that I'm picking, is that I really like them and or had a lot of these boots. But looking back, it's like, wow, that was a terrible idea and a terrible pair of football boots. And the first thing that pops in my mind is like a crazy concept is it was called a Les Clar, the clear heel on the F50 TUNiTs. Remember that? So it was F50.8 was the first one to have it, and then F50.9 had it as well. And just looking back and thinking of the concept of, hey, the heel liner, the one part of the boot that's meant to hold your heel in place and be as comfortable as possible, because that's the most common area where you're going to get a blister. Let's make that solid plastic.
See, the funny thing is, the reason I'm laughing is that, I had the boot next to me because I prepared a little and I was actually going to talk about the heel, I didn't remember the name, so good job on that. But also the TUNiT system, because this boot was just like I know I can't say that word, but I'm going to say it anyway. It was like a cluster of just, just really, really bad ideas. And I mean, I know we've been hating a lot on the TUNiT system, and for good reason, because it really sucked. It was a very, very good idea, and Adidas kind of refined it with the whole glitch concept that I also thought about, but decided it actually worked. So I'm cool with that. But the whole TUNiT system was just bad because it actually didn't work. The boot snapped, the insole snapped, the studs fell out. It was heavy. It just never really worked as intended. And then there was, of course, this like god awful plastic heel piece that wasn't very comfortable, and I don't know what it really did apart from showing the color of your socks, which looked really cool. But from a performance point of view, it was a terrible idea. I understand why they did it. I just don't understand why they decided to roll with it after testing it and finding out most likely that it wasn't really a good fit.
Yeah, it's a cool, like I looking back as a kid, I thought it was the coolest concept ever. And I had an original pair of F50.8 TUNiTs. It was the only pair I ever had. And I ended up having, I think I told the story, but I ended up bruising my heel. That was mostly my fault. But the outsole had to be incredibly stiff in order to house these kind of screw-in points for all of the studs. And the concept of being able to create your own stud pattern or change up the length of the studs basically in different spots, that concept really did work with the TUNiT. The studs falling out was a completely different story. But in order to get that system on the boot, everything else about the product had to be either subpar or just extremely gimmicky. And it just never ended up being a well-rounded product. Heavy, bulky, stiff, durability issues. And I also love the fact, I remember the first time I saw somebody else playing in the F50.8 with the clear heel. It was actually the yellow pair with the perfectly clear. So that one has a red tint. This was perfectly clear.
Nice.
And I remember at the start of the second half looking at his boots, because he was actually the man marking me, and there was like condensation buildup on the inside. And I'm like, wow, that is just so awful looking. And it was at that point I realized, you know what? Maybe this is not a pair of football boots that I eventually want to own.
No. And having worn it, it definitely wasn't. Again, I appreciate the TUNiT concept for what it was, and the idea behind it. The execution was just bad.
Yeah.
So there you have it. And I think that goes for all the TUNiT boots except for the iTUNiT that I actually kind of liked also, because it really set the tone for the Adi Zero with the sprint skin. So I'm okay with that. But all the TUNiT boots, they didn't really live up to expectation. I think actually the F30 boots were a lot better because they had molded studs. So
for sure. Okay, what's another epic Adi fail?
I was gonna say, but I realized this might just be me, and there will be a lot of people out there hating on me. But for me, it has to be the Predator X. I think that the Predator X doesn't deserve to be on the list of the worst boots in history, but it definitely deserves to be mentioned on this list because it, to me, is the worst Predator in history. And I know you probably disagree, and I'll let you tell me why in a second. But what this did for me was basically to do everything wrong in terms of what a Predator was. It cut down on the amount of leather. It basically took away the tongue. It minimized the elements, and it was just a chunky, stiff, rigid, very uncomfortable business, and I hated it. And I've actually taken my laces out of this boot to kind of show how the burrito tongue worked, which also really sucked. And I haven't bothered in putting them in because I'm never going to wear this ever again. So from like I think the reason I hate it so much is that they seem to have known that they undid a lot of the stuff that the Predator had kind of built up. They removed the tongue, and okay, it worked on the Adi Power, but on this boot, it just didn't feel right because it had the power and the punch and the oomph of a Predator of old. It just felt hella bulky and not very good, to be honest.
I actually agree with you. I think that...
Wait, what?
The Predator X is the worst Predator. I mean, I don't want to say it's the worst Predator because I still feel like the Predator X is more Predator than the Pred 18 or 19 were. That's
okay, fair enough.
A personal opinion. But in terms of going from Power Swerve to X, it's a step down in quality. The leather is worse. There's less of it. I think the Predator X is easily the ugliest Predator ever made. Maybe the LZ1 and LZ2 would give it a run for its money.
Depending on colorway, yes, I would agree with you.
But not a great looking boot. Stiff, heavy, just not a lot going for it. I think that the experience of striking the ball in a Predator X is still very Predator. I think it does that quite well. But it's I think the boot that's responsible for the main decline of the Predator and eventually it getting killed off. So I would agree with you. It was Adidas really trying. They basically had this Predator concept that everybody loved, and they tried to make their own version of a Nike T90, and it just didn't work.
Exactly. So more Adi boots you hate. That should be on the.
See, I don't have much else that like comes to mind or like really like strikes me as like that was terrible.
Do you remember back in the day? I don't think it ever saw the light of day, but they did this Climate Cool boot that was like I've seen a sample and a concept of it, but it was basically like, imagine like an American soccer cleat, but low cut, like super stiff, with Climate Cool technology in it. I think it got shelved for a reason, but that didn't really work. But to be fair, they never released it, so they made the smart choice.
Yeah, I think that whole Climate Cool concept they were running with for a couple of years was just a little bit silly. Like it didn't make a lot of sense. Why open up the entire bottom of the boot to be ventilated to let water in? It's not a concept that anybody really thought was a good idea. But yeah, I don't like when I thought of this idea, I'm like, oh, there's going to be so many Adi boots on this list. And honestly, like, could I pick on a bunch of different laceless boots that they've made? I guess I could, but I don't think that any of them have been complete failures, aside from the takedown models, but we're not going to include that on this list.
And that's what I think is also something we need to be careful with, because they have taken a lot of chances, but I also think that no matter how many chances they've taken, they've actually managed to put out a solid football boot that isn't a complete train wreck. So to their credit, yes, they do take a lot of chances, but often they also manage to salvage it simply because they're very good at making solid football boots, no matter what they decide to do. So even that there might be some Adi Zeros that I didn't particularly like myself, I know that from like objectively speaking, they were solid boots. And I think the only thing, but this also ties to the F50 TUNiT. I mean, this abomination just needs to go away.
Yeah. The giant lace cover and these like laminated plastic synthetics that Adidas was doing for a little stint.
It didn't work.
Not great.
So let's close that with Adidas and just please guys never do the TUNiT concept again. We're all good. Let's move on to their German brothers at Puma, because they have also made some, I wouldn't say mishaps, but let's call them missteps.
Look, again, I hate to pick on companies for trying new things, but there are certain new concepts and ideas that were clear that they were never going to work from the start. Like they just had to know. And the first one that pops in my head is the whole V-Constructs series with the built-in like hard foam nylon pads. Like I get Nike had T90, Adidas had Predator, and then Puma's like, let's make our own boot that kind of has that power boot vibe about it, but none of the extra grip, none of the aggressiveness of these striking elements. Let's just make basically a rock hard upper, so if you get stepped on, you can't feel it. And like, I get that concept. It makes sense to be, hey, we're going to be unique. We're going to have the most protective football boot on the market, but there's absolutely nothing exciting about protection. Like, think about the boots that have been successful. Speed. People want to run fast. They want to score goals. They want a powerful shot. They want to control the ball. Nobody's like, you know what I really value more than anything in a football boot? It's getting stepped on.
I know what you're saying. But to be fair, weren't the V-Construct 3s, weren't they solid football boots. I mean, I had a pair. I enjoyed them to a certain extent.
I wasn't crazy about any of them. I don't think that any of them were the most aesthetically pleasing either. I don't know. It was just a concept that clearly never caught on.
What do you think about the Power Cats then? Because I immediately thought of that and was like, okay, it didn't work. And they actually, after the Power Cats, they went out and they did the exact opposite with the Evo Power concept. So the Power Cat had these 3D power shooting technology fins that were supposed to, basically store power for a very, very short amount of time when they were compressed, and then release it again immediately after propelling the ball forward. We've heard some of this stuff before. And then they went to the Evo Power and was like, oh, it's all about shooting barefoot, which is not what the Evo Power was about. But I still think they were not bad football boots. They just never really fulfilled their, purpose, I feel. Are they the worst boots ever? Probably not.
Oh,
but
definitely not. I think I would like to go back and wear a Power Cat 1.10 because it's been a while. But that's very early on when I started doing this. That's one of the first I think high-end Puma boots for the most part that I got to wear. And I really enjoyed those. I thought the concept was cool. And I thought there were issues with the fit. There were issues with lockdown. It was not, I think, the best in terms of overall touch, but the experience of striking the ball, similar to a Predator X, I thought was really good. And then I think the Power Cat 112s were all pretty decent for the most part. What stands out to me, aside from the V-Construct stuff from Puma, is, that V-Series line. I think...
Which I, funnily enough, have in my hands.
Right.
It's a McDonald's boot, Ronald McDonald right here.
McDonald's V110 was a very questionable design. I think V108, when that came out, I remember thinking to myself, it's a very cool looking football boot. And it was a different time back then because you had to actually go to a store to see them. Buying boots online was not the most common thing in the world back then. And I think once you actually got to see the boots in person and saw this weird shape to the toe and this large plastic kind of lip at the front, it was a football boot that you would put on your feet and you'd either love it or you hated it. It was one of those things. And I think most people hated it.
I agree. I actually think the V series started well. The V1 series started well. The 106 was amazing. It wasn't the most durable thing in the world, to be fair to it, but it was an absolutely fantastic speed boot. And it kind of, I feel it kind of set the tone of these super minimalistic lightweight boots for years to come. I just think Puma really dropped the ball with the 110s because it did everything. It is everything that the V106 isn't. So it's not nimble. It's not the lightest thing in the world. Is relatively light, to be fair, but it's just so stiff and chunky. And this is the ultimate toe poke boot because there's no way you're ever gonna get under the ball with up. And there's almost up spoon on this boot. So your toes are pointing upwards a little bit. The lip on front of the boot is super tall, and there's this reinforced synthetic strip that just makes the toe of the boot extra tall and chunky. It doesn't work for me, Josh. The synthetic wasn't very nice, and it's one of those boots that, even objectively speaking, is just bad. I don't remember how I even put myself into these and thought, okay, I can wear these in a match because I shouldn't have been able to. Okay, it had a nice carbon fiber insert in the tool. The tooling is nice. I like that, but it still can't save this boot for me. Absolute piece of trash.
Too weird of a concept. I think the V111 was an improvement for sure.
Especially the SL.
Back, that's what I was just gonna say. I think V110 SL, aside from the maybe durability not being the greatest, I think you can look back on that, and that's a very underrated Puma speed boot. The other one that I want to bring up, and I think it's an easy one to forget, it's basically the return after Puma King finale. It was just titled as Puma King, no? The yellow, it launched in yellow and black.
Ah, yeah. But worst boot ever?
Oh, that sucked. That boot sucked. They took away kangaroo leather. The quality of the leather they included was garbage. The boot was bulky. It didn't fit well. It was stiff. It was everything that a Puma King wasn't supposed to be.
Yeah, it wasn't good. I agree it wasn't good, but I never...
I don't think you're right in saying that it's not the worst boot ever, but if we're going to put a Predator X on the list in terms of being responsible for the decline of the Predator line, that's responsible for the King going away for like 4 or 5 years.
But the funny thing is that back in those days, Puma were really good at making like rubbish standard versions of their boots and then killing it with the SL models, because that Puma King SL, the yellow one, was absolutely amazing. Yeah. It was like this synthetic leather, and it kicked ass, man. It was awesome. Yeah, anyway, I think I see where you're coming from. I'll accept it.
I think that's it for Puma. They've tried a lot of different things. Puma, unfortunately, I think they've had like trending. Instead of like just one bad model, they just had a bad concept that they'd run with for several generations. So they'd have like 2 or 3 year stints where it's like, what the heck are they thinking? And then they come out with something a lot better. So,
but the thing is, even like the Evo Speed series, they weren't bad boots. They just weren't amazing either. The second Evo Speed was pretty brutal, but it wasn't. Yeah. It's not among the worst football boots in the history of the world, I would say.
I agree with you.
But, those boots will come. We're moving into one of them very soon because we are going to talk about Nike. And one boot immediately comes to mind. Actually, 2 boots, because they have dropped the ball on more than one occasion. Which do you want to talk about? It's all...
I'm actually curious what your pick is, because I had a little bit, like... I didn't have a hard time, but looking back, I thought there would be more that would jump out at me. What do you got?
Should I just start with... I'll just go with both of them. So here we have the Hypervenom Phantom 2 and the Nike Mercurial Superfly 2. Absolutely, utterly, disgracefully terrible football boots. Typically, Nike make very good boots, but there is nothing good about, especially... the Superfly 2 for me. It's a really cool looking colorway. I love the wind chill colorway, but it was just, it's such a bad or a good example of very, very bad decision making all up in here. Because the first Superfly, it wasn't great. Had some serious durability issues, which is why the first colorway, the red chrome, never saw the light of day. It wasn't released to the market. But it's just like, it worked to some extent. Once you broke it in, it was actually an enjoyable football boot to wear if you could live with the paint. It was a very like Vapor One-ish type of boot because you had to suffer a little bit to really enjoy it. You also had to suffer a lot in the Superfly 2s, but you just never got the enjoyment part because it was stiff. It had a really big toe box, made it super, super chunky. I felt the lockdown was almost too strong, as in, it was so claustrophobic around my foot. I got so many blisters. The outsole was pretty snappy, but it felt again clumsy because of the size of the Nike Zen stud, which, by the way, they didn't work. Yes, they moved, but they never worked. So I don't see many good points about this, and they weighed 235 grams.
Yeah.
It's just a bad football boot. The synthetic was thicker. It's not very soft even. It's just, mate, rubbish.
Okay, I don't want people to get mad in the comments because I think picking on older Mercurial models, especially those ones, like those are the Mercurials that I grew up with, right? So back when it was a current model, and I bet you were the same way, you convinced yourself that, hey, this is a really good pair of football boots and I'm going to just bear the pain and wear them because this is the best football boot, the most high-tech one that I can buy. Because that was my mentality back then as a kid with a lot of these Mercurial models. But I think if you look back and really like compare it to what we have now, that is not a good pair of football boots. Like the fact that you even have to suggest that you had to bear a certain amount of pain over a certain amount of hours to get to the point where you can at least kind of, I guess, what's the word that I'm looking for? just handle wearing them. Like it's one of those boots that you tolerate. To the point where you could tolerate having these football boots on your feet. And you made a really good point with the Superfly too, in that it's a football boot that had such a structured upper. Normally with a boot, you have the upper adjust to your foot. That was a boot where you had to adjust to the boot. It's like, this is my shape and it's not going to change. And we had a hockey reference at the start. I'm going to make another one. That is exactly how I would describe a brand new pair of hockey skates. It's this stiff, horrible boot that you stick your foot in, and it's just going to take hours and hours until your foot gets used to being squished into this position.
Why the hell do you play this sport, man?
It is bad. Injured. New hockey skates, there is nothing worse than new hockey skates. Trust me when I say that.
I'll never understand hockey, to be honest. You know, if you have to endure Superfly 2 levels of footwear, you get into fights. You know, this puck thing can basically break your nose if you're unlucky. You know, like there are 3 million ways you can slice your wrists or any other stuff on your body, and you know, just no. But
it's great.
Probably for me, the objectively worst Nike boot that has ever been made is what I'm gonna say.
I think you can lump Superfly 3 in there with it because it's really more or less the same thing.
Yeah, Superfly 3 had a slightly lower toe box, which made me hate it just ever so slightly less. But yeah, it's bad. It's brutal. What I also think is one of the worst boots in history is the Hypervenom Phantom 2. Not because it, objectively speaking, is as bad as the Superfly 2 and 3, but simply because it ruined one of the best boots of the decade. And it is not a boot, even though I didn't know what it stood for, basically. It's not a boot I would go back to because it's stiff. It again is one of those boots that you never really could break in. You had to just live with the shape and the fit of the boot. Nothing wrong with the sock, really. The lockdown system was actually all right if the boot had been able to move with your foot. And the outsole was good because it also was on the first Hypervenom. It was simply just that added layer of Nike skin with, you know, the thickness of the synthetic and the fact that it wasn't very pliable that just messed everything up. Yeah, such a shame.
Way too stiff. I think a huge downgrade from the first one. And I want to say, and I'm not sure I've ever said this on camera on the internet, but looking back at all the reviews that I've done on all these different football boots over the years, granted I was a lot younger back then and still relatively new to it, maybe a little bit afraid of pissing off a brand like Nike, but I think I was too nice in my initial review of the Hypervenom Phantom 2 and the finish to go along with it. Because I think Nike, out of any brand, really does a good job of selling you on this new concept and new technology that they've come up with. And you want to like it, but that's just one of those boots that just did not work. And the sales reflected that to the point where we actually did get the old upper back in the later colorways of the Phantom 2, which is pretty unheard of from Nike. They just historically would never do something like that, but it was such an issue that they had to kind of make a change mid-life cycle to try and generate some sales again.
The funny thing about that particular boot is, if you asked me which review I regret making the most, as in where I was too nice and it probably didn't reflect what I truly felt, it would be the same boot. You know, I'd gone to the launch, prior to the boot coming out. I've spoken to the designers. I'd really bought into the idea, and I don't think, the idea that I'd built up in my head about the boot, I simply didn't have enough time to try it out for it to properly manifest it in myself that I actually hated it. So I was still trying to convince myself and everyone apparently watching the review that it was as good of a boot as the Hypervenom 1, because I really wanted it to be, if you know what I mean. So probably being young and, being a little bit too easy to, what's it called? Swayed?
Yeah,
speak
right.
English. Yeah, I was a little too easily affected by the whole media machine, because it was a rubbish football boot, and I'd love to go back and actually do it again. But then again, I'd probably not have a job. So,
but you know what, Jay? I think that's an aspect of what both of our positions that I think a lot of people don't realize is that we we know some of these designers and we know some of these guys working at these big brands that are responsible for these boots that we are going to review, and thousands upon thousands of people are going to be waiting on our opinion. And it really does suck when something comes out and you can't be as nice as you want to be, because I think honesty is very important. But you know these guys that were responsible for this product, and it sucks to like, hey man, I know you were friends and all, but like this is not very good.
Exactly. Thankfully, there aren't that many boots out there these days that really like Hypervenom 2, Superfly 2 and 3 level suck. But I wish I'd been a little bit more nuanced and objective back in the day, because the boot didn't deserve all the praise I gave it. So so fair play to that. A really bad football boot. I also that would probably be it for me. Boots from Nike that are really super bad.
Yeah, I'm just going to rapid fire piss off the internet a little bit and a lot of people's childhoods, including my own. But looking back again, if I'm being very brutally honest with myself, I would not wear Vapor 3. I would not wear Vapor 4. I would not wear Superfly 1, 2, or 3. All of those Mercurials, the fact that there was a 90% chance you're going to come away from that first wear bleeding, not good. That's not a good pair of football boots.
How dare you list the Vapor 3 as the worst football boot in history? It's unheard of. It is unacceptable. And it is like potentially friendship ending stuff.
Jay, I just remember at a tournament, we were in the States in Michigan.
None of what you're going to say is going to help you.
There was a tent sale and Vapor 4s had just come out. I had a pair of Vapor 4s, had gotten through all of the brutal break-in process of them. And I walk in this tent sale and they have all these like last generation Nike boots on sale for like nothing. I bought a pair of blue R9 Vapor 3s for $60. And like looking back, they had like stacks of like the R9 yellow and green ones, the Brazil colorway, stacks for $60 a piece. Like looking back, like I could have bought all those boots and those are all worth like $300, $400, $500 now, right? Crazy. I know it's ridiculous looking back. Anyways, I buy these Vapor 3s in blue because I always, even though I had the Vapor 4, I'm like, oh, the Vapor 3 just looks so much better. It's to me aesthetically one of the best looking boots ever made, right? But I remember putting those Vapor 3s on my feet and trying to break them in, and it's just like, man, I thought these Vapor 4s were uncomfortable. These are even worse. Like they just didn't fit me, and it was uncomfortable. And I think I wore them like 2 or 3 times until I eventually sold them off to a friend. And I don't know, for me, that was while a lot of people grew up with the Mercurials like myself during that era, I just think looking back, that was not a good stretch for the Nike brand. But because there was really no alternative, they were competing against the F50 TUNiT, which is also on the list for some of the worst boots ever made. That was your best option if you wanted that style of football boot.
So young, such a guy. Try working with this guy, honestly. I would say I'm not going to put the Vapor 4s on the list because they weren't that bad. I mean, they weren't tragically bad, but they were definitely a very, very bad pair of Vapors. Vapor 5s were also pretty brutal. 6s bad, 7s not good either, but the Vapor 4s, which is next level terrible for me. But I think the Superfly 2 and 3s and the Hypervenom 2s were by far the worst boots, compared to the time they were in that Nike have ever put out.
Okay, that's fair.
But I might be wrong. You guys should let us know if we have completely dropped the ball or if you guys agree for whatever. You've also lost your mind and claim that Vapor 3 is one of the worst Nike. What are you talking about, bro? Let's move on to other stuff before I get too tense and upset here.
So from here, I don't think we have to go brand by brand. Just whatever pops in your head and like a quick 20-second explanation of why it's terrible. Go.
New Balance Vizaro 2s because it's almost stiffer than anything that has ever been made, and New Balance Furon 1 because it actually manages to be stiffer and even worse fitting than the Vizaro 2s. So absolutely terrible. Then I have the Joma Fit 100 Lite, which desperately wants to be an F50.8 2nd generation. but it's not. It's some cheap wannabe leather synthetic that's super stiff. The lockdown is absolutely disgustingly bad, and they put a green eagle on the inside of a red boot, which just, makes my blood boil. And finally, the Select Milano Retro, which is probably the worst lockdown I've ever experienced in a football boot. So take it away.
Oh, you were ready for that question. I wasn't expecting that. I think there are a number of Under Armour boots that can be on this list. Yeah. I don't think we have to name anything specifically, but early Under Armour, yeah, that one. Okay, look, Spotlight's not terrible. It's just dumb.
It's just dumb. Yeah, it's not the worst boot. Let's be completely fair here. Yeah. It is nowhere near being the worst football boot in history.
Yeah. But early Under Armour boots were questionable. And I'm comfortable. I don't think I've ever told this story, but I'm comfortable talking about it now. Right when I first, maybe within the first year and a half of starting SR4U, I started to get the attention of some of the smaller brands. So I think Lotto was one of the first companies to send me some boots to review. And Under Armour was another one that reached out. And I think it was the original Blur, the Under Armour Blur.
Right.
The launch color, there was a black colorway, and then there was a chrome colorway. And they sent me prototypes. They weren't they were samples. I think it said prototype on the thing, but they were pre-release samples. And they actually gave them to me, several pairs to review or to have ready for when they would launch it, which was a very cool thing for me. I thought it was an amazing opportunity. And I remember the first time I went to play in these things, I'm like, wow, these are brutally uncomfortable. The synthetic is so stiff. And the plastic in the studs, and I'm not sure if it was just because they were prototypes, but the plastic would actually disintegrated. Half of the stud wore away wearing them on grass. I wasn't walking through parking lots. I don't know what happened. And I remember oh my God, this is terrible, because the very first guys that sent me stuff to do a review on, I'm like, I'm going to trash them? It just seemed like it was such a bad thing, right? So I remember emailing them behind the scenes, and I think they ended up sending me a retail version, and none of these were issues. Well, the boots still weren't very good, but the studs wouldn't wear away, right? But that was just a really I remember a very stressful situation for me, because I finally achieved what I really wanted to achieve in starting this and having a big brand recognize my opinion as being valuable to them. And it's man, I got to give us a bad review. It's terrible, right?
Yeah. I remember the first bad review I gave was actually to an Under Armour Create Pro 2. It was also terrible, and it has given me blisters I've never, ever had before.
Yeah, that's a bad one. I'll also say, and this is another company that is not particularly fond of me, the first time, I don't even know which model it is at this point, but Concave got in contact with me. This was years ago.
Oh, yeah, Concave.
And they sent me, they were white and blue, leather upper at the toe, and then this is when they were still doing the big Concave wedge, right? So early days of Concave. And I was actually very excited to try these out, even though I recognize that this is a concept that I'm most likely not going to like. But I assumed, having this huge plastic wedge, this is going to has to be effective, right? It has to at least have some kind of impact when striking the ball. And to my surprise, you just didn't notice it. It made little to no difference. The only thing that I would notice is that I had a really hard time juggling the ball because I had this giant plastic wedge on top of my foot. And I was just this is bad. This is not good at all. And I remember specifically for that boot, I went out and bought a radar gun that I could not afford at the time. And I'm I'm going to get a radar gun. At the very least, maybe this will add 2 or 3 miles an hour onto your shot. And it didn't. It was no more effective than any other football boot. In fact, during that test, the fastest shot I hit was actually a pair of Mercurials with a super thin upper.
Yeah, that's the funny thing, right?
Yeah.
That is the funny thing. Another boot I want to bring up, I've never seen it in hand, but it's just so dumb that it can't work. Serafino 4th Edge Topo boot.
I don't know how that didn't pop into my head, but yeah, that's a bad one.
That and some dumb guy off the internet made a remake of this amazing shoe. I think it was made by a Spanish brand.
Okay, yeah.
And this geezer, he tried to be clever, and have you seen that? It's I
have seen it. I think I forget the guy's name, but it's Joma was the company. Champion Max, I believe.
But that is on the flip side, one of the finest boots ever made to man. I wanted to bring one more up, and I just, I've never seen it in hand, but it has to suck badly, and it has to be the Zygo Destruct.
I've never had a pair in person. I've never tried them, but yeah, that's a pretty. Again, it looks like one of those things that maybe could be kind of effective, but just very strange. I'll also say, I think Diadora's had some weird ones over the years.
What was the one that was basically the Adidas glitch?
That's the one I was thinking as being really bad. And in fairness to Diadora, that was not a top-end boot. I think that's like an $80 retail price on those.
Right, okay.
But I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But yeah, I had a pair. That's another one. They sent me those. And I'm like, guys, what am I supposed to say nice about this? This is brutal. Like it's like they took a rubber boot and put some cleats on the bottom and called it a day. Like it's just one of the worst things. And the funny part about that is I remember getting those, and I'd have to go back and watch my review, but I'm pretty confident that I said this is not a very good product. It's an interesting idea, but not a very good product. And I think I was maybe a little bit nicer than I should have been, but the ultimate conclusion was like, you shouldn't buy these. And I remember Diadora had sent them out to a few other media outlet / reviewers, and they had this like really nice review about them and how they're actually pretty good. And I'm like,
Christ,
what are you guys smoking right now? Like, there's no way that this is a good product, right? But
one more thing popped in my head, and it wasn't a bad boot. In fact, it was a pretty good boot. But the first generation of the Magista Opus 2. With the zits on. That was
that's
it wasn't a bad boot. It was just like, I felt bad, running around with them on my feet. So
it's the Diadora Cambio.
Cambio, that's true. Yeah, that's
Cambio
true. That's that. But I guess unless you have any honorable mentions on the list, that was the unofficial official list of the worst boots ever made in the history of football. If you are either mad or completely agree with our list, then you should let us know in the comment section right down below, and also leave a little thumbs up on the video here. We would greatly appreciate that. Spread some love. Don't make people mad. We just want to share. But Josh, before we end this, I have a few questions that I feel we should totally try and answer, because they're good questions. As per usual, guys, you're getting better and better at asking very solid questions. I have one here from Alejandro A. Best. Recurring user, listener is what I wanted to say. Why is the Mercurial called that way? The Mercurial. I imagine it has something to do with Mexico because of the World Cup of '86, but Mercurial really isn't an important city, so there must be another reason for Mizuno to choose that name for the most important boot. And I looked it up, and I spoke to some guys who really know their stuff, and they confirmed what I suspected, which is that it is named after the city, Morelia, in Mexico. So I guess that is, your assumption was right. That was made for the World Cup in '86, and it was named after Morelia, which is, I think, where they did a lot of the wear testing and stuff. Spoke to some players there. So yeah, that was the inspiration. Did you know, Josh?
I had no idea. I was actually trying to think of a story that I could just make up on the spot, but I couldn't come up with anything quick enough. So
fair enough. I also have another great question here from Alejandro Ruiz. What boot would you say you are according to your personality? Which I think is a fantastic question.
Wow.
Okay, can I do you? Can I do you and you do me?
Yeah,
and
fine,
we can say if we agree or disagree afterwards.
Sure.
You would be the Nike Laser 2s.
I was thinking, that's what popped in my head, is like, I'm probably a T90 Laser of some sort.
Yes.
I'm trying to think what you would be. And I know what you would want to be. You'd want to be a JayMike edition Puma 1-1 would be the obvious choice. But that's a boring answer.
Okay.
It's a really boring answer.
What's the cool answer then? What question is, what's the true answer?
That's a great question. What do you think you are? Just out of curiosity.
I want to hear what you think I am beforehand. It's okay. You have already hurt my feelings badly in this podcast.
I'm really stumped on this one because I'm not one to associate personality traits with football boots. I feel like you would be a Mizuno product of some sort.
Okay, that makes me happy.
I'm tempted to say that you're a Wave Cup legend of some sort.
Is that because it's one of my favorite boots ever, or just because? I think because you have some legendary status in the football boot industry. Go on.
As does the football boot.
Okay, go on.
It's got some good style to it. I think you're a little bit more stylish than you get credit for. Definitely more than I am, I would say.
Continue.
And I think you're a quality guy, just like the boots.
My man.
That was really nice, right? That was really good. Yeah, I'm happy with that answer.
That was pretty good. I was gonna say I'm like a Copa 1920 plus, but I'll take what you just said. That completely overruled anything I was gonna say. So on that, absolutely a perfect note. I think we should jump on to the last question, which is from Lamfam, who is the underdog of the football boots industry. I thought long and hard about it, and I didn't really know what to say because what defines an underdog?
I don't think that there is a true underdog in the industry right now.
That's a good answer.
Puma has gotten proper recognition when they make good products. Like I really feel like that the success of that brand is really based on the quality of the boots. If the boots are bad, no one cares about Puma. If the boots are good, they get some attention. Nike and Adi, neither of them can be considered underdogs.
No.
Mizuno, I think, is recognized as a great brand. Like I can't view them as an underdog. They're underrated.
Is that us, or is it like the general public?
I think they're underrated rather than underdogs.
True. I accept that.
Right? I feel like an underdog is a brand making good boots that nobody realizes making good boots. I guess maybe you could give that title a Lotto right now. And the fact that their boots aren't necessarily available everywhere, it makes them a little bit of an underdog. But at the same time, I don't think that their boots are necessarily to the same standard as the more recognizable brands.
When I thought about it, I kind of thought about New Balance because they have the odds stacked against them, which is typically what I would say an underdog is. They make great football boots. But the odds are kind of stacked against them, especially now that they're losing Liverpool. Like, what are they going to do? How are they going to sell their really good football boots? I don't know if they're too high profile to really call them an underdog because they have a lot of money. They're a big company and a lot of people know them. My other guess would be Umbro, but I don't think the quality of the boots, it's not good enough to really be like, they're just a small brand. Sorry, Umbro, but...
And New Balance, I think New Balance, like you said, they're an established brand. I think you're going to be hard-pressed to find somebody that doesn't know what New Balance is. And I think the only reason they could even be considered an underdog is because they dug themselves a very deep hole before actually making anything that people wanted or cared about. So their underdog status is like a self-made thing on their part. So, yeah, I don't really think that right now there isn't an underdog football boot brand right now.
Who's the overdog?
The overdog. Is that a term?
I had no idea. I just made it up.
It's definitely not, just so you're aware.
But see, that's the benefit of not speaking English as my first language, because I can just basically make up whatever I please, because people will just shrug their shoulders and say, "Oh, Jay is just rubbish at English." So as you can hear, yeah, you get the point.
Oh man, overdog. You made me think for a second. You know what I do think as kind of an underdog? Not right now, but at some point in time, is I think JayMike at one point was a little bit of an underdog company. Like when they were doing boots like the Total Fit, that was a good boot. I thought I really liked those.
They were not bad. I would give you that, but they were just brutally heavy, weren't they?
Yeah, but
you can't you can't put your hand on your heart.
Most boots.
You can't put your hand on your heart right now and say JayMike is an underdog brand.
No, I can't.
They're dogs because they copy and stuff, but they're not like.
We're all waiting. I think we're all eagerly waiting to see what the next big move for JayMike is in the football boot world, because They've been pretty quiet since the JayMike Champion Max thing.
It's because you destroyed their entire company, man. That's the reason right there. It's because they're dead. They're gone. You completely obliterated the company just
I'm actually surprised, like, because right around the time I don't think I had featured anything JayMike on the channel for a very long time until doing Champion Max. And at that point, like, I followed them on Instagram and all this stuff and like liked a few pictures. And I was like, I wonder if I'm going to get blocked. I wonder. It's never happened. I don't think I've ever been blocked by any of the big brands, but if there's one that would consider blocking me, I'm assuming it would be them.
I would love for the first, if we ever get a brand guys on the podcast, which would be amazing, but difficult because there's a lot of stuff they can't say, obviously. But if we ever get someone, I want the first brand to be on the podcast to be JayMike. That would be like, and if we are to get into the whole, YouTube boxing stuff, I want the designer or the product line manager, the engineer, whatever, of the JayMike Champion Max to come up against you.
Yeah. That'd be quite a podcast. Yeah. And you brought up a good point in saying that we do know a lot of like industry insider guys and even designers of a lot of these football boots. The issue with them coming on is that there's so much that they've signed in terms of what they can and cannot talk about that it's very difficult. Like we would almost have to have like a script to stick to.
Exactly.
So not for our protection, but for their protection, because legally they're only allowed to talk about certain things and say certain things. And I think in an open conversation format where we would ask questions that obviously they wouldn't be able to answer, it'd be very difficult for them. So it's a lot of pressure on them to come on versus us to talk with them.
And that, I think, is the reason we haven't done it yet, because we feel that, we could totally get people on here, I think. But it's just a question of how much would we be willing to sacrifice in terms of integrity and openness, because there would be a lot of stuff we simply can't talk about. And it would be getting more of like the brand talk, because that's just the way it goes. And that's the name of the game. We all know it's there, and So yeah, but if you want to have any designers on the Boot Nerds podcast and you have any great ideas on how we can do a format like that, you can let us know in the comment section right down below. As usual, you are the nerds, the geniuses that we do this for. So if you have any things that you want us to do, hit us up in the comment section right down below. We're going to do more questions next time, which will also be coming out slightly later, because there's some fire dropping that we want to tell you guys about. So we're going to let you know as next week goes by. And with that said, remember to go subscribe to Josh's channel. He releases a lot of cool videos. He also does his car problems channel, where you can see all his fancy automobiles, and he talks about those very passionately. It's very cool. Go subscribe to that. Also, if you want to see what we do at Unisport, where we, for instance, just today hang out with Neymar, you can go subscribe to our channel and see what's coming out of that. And finally, go subscribe to the best podcast on the interwebs by clicking the white bubble in the middle of your screen and turn on the notifications. And with that said, I have been JayMike, and I love you, Josh, for that wave legend comparison. I'm signing off. Cheerio.
It's good. Also, I just have one more to add to the list. Nike GS1, terrible football boot.
Shut up.
Terrible.
Friendship over. Friendship over. I'm done.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next episode.
I'm done. It's over.